The HOA told me my family cabin didn't belong anymore and demanded I leave immediately. They waived fines, threats, and fake authority with absolute confidence. What they never questioned was who actually owned the lake and why their entire community depended on my land. "People like you don't belong here," Miranda Ashworth said at the HOA meeting, sliding a $120,000 demand letter across the table. The thick paper demanded I upgrade within 45 days the cabin my grandfather built in 1954, long before their luxury homes existed. This was the only home my 17-year-old son Trevor had ever known, the same porch where his mother took her last breath 3 years ago. "We all want what's best for the community, Mr. Guthrie." Miranda's fake smile flashed, her white Tesla waiting outside, designer handbag slung over her arm. She was the type who saw working families as stains on her pristine neighborhood. She thought she could force me out. She had no idea I owned all 15 acres of Cedar Lake, the body of water their entire community surrounded, and that the parking lot where her Tesla sat daily was on my family's land, used for 70 years without permission. My name is Wesley Guthrie, but everyone calls me Wes. I'm 47, spent most of my adult life operating heavy equipment, and I know my way around a septic system better than most plumbers know their own toolbox. The smell of diesel fuel and the rumble of machinery, that's my office. But the most important thing about me is that I'm raising Trevor alone. Ever since my wife Sarah died in a car accident 3 years ago, that accident still haunts me. Some rich kid in a BMW ran a red light going 80 in a 35 zone. Sarah never had a chance. The kid's daddy hired a hotshot lawyer, and he walked away with community service while my world fell apart. That's when I learned how the system really works. Money talks, and working folks like us just listen. The cabin has been in our family since 1954, when my grandfather Samuel bought 15 acres of pristine wilderness around what was then just a quiet mountain lake. Grandpa was smart. He kept the lake and the main access road, selling off parcels around the shoreline with lake access privileges. Back then, it was just a few fishing buddies with modest summer cottages. Fast forward 70 years, and Cedar Lake has become some kind of luxury paradise. 80 houses now, most worth $500,000 or more, Tesla driveways, infinity pools, the works. Right in the middle of it all sits my little cabin. Original wood siding, screen porch that creaks in the wind, Trevor's tire swing still hanging from the old oak tree Sarah planted when he was 5. The cabin isn't much to look at, I'll admit. Needs paint, the porch sags a little, and my boat's seen better decades. But it's home. More than that, it's the only stability Trevor's known since we lost his mom. Then came Miranda Ashworth, HOA vice president, driving a white Tesla Model X and selling luxury lake properties for Premium Shores Realty. She's got that particular kind of confidence that comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying groceries. Perfectly straight blonde hair that probably costs more to maintain than I spend on groceries in a month. And she has this way of looking at working folks like we're some kind of stain on her designer furniture. I first met Miranda at the annual HOA meeting last March. She stood up during new business and pointed directly at me. "We need to address the aesthetic issues affecting our property values," she announced like I wasn't sitting right there. "Certain properties are inconsistent with our community standards." The smell of her perfume, something floral and expensive, mixed with the musty odor of the community center's old carpet. I could hear Trevor shifting uncomfortably in the chair next to me, the metal legs scraping against the linoleum floor. Specifically, Miranda continued, "We're implementing mandatory property improvement standards. All residences must comply within 45 days. She slid a folder across the table. The papers inside rustled as I opened it, that crisp sound of expensive letterhead. $120,000. New siding, professional landscaping, deck replacement, water view appropriate outbuildings, the works. "This is insane," I said, standing up. "My grandfather built this cabin before most of your houses existed." Miranda's smile could have frozen the lake in July. "Mr. Guthrie, we all want what's best for the community. Property values benefit everyone." That night, lying awake listening to the gentle lap of water against my dock, I realized what was happening. This wasn't about property values. This was about pushing out anyone who didn't fit their country club vision. And with the insurance money from Sarah's accident tied up in Trevor's college fund, there was no way I could afford their demands. But Miranda made one crucial mistake. She assumed she knew who she was dealing with. 2 weeks after that meeting, the first real shot was fired. I was out on the lake early one morning checking my fishing lines when I heard the rumble of diesel engines. 3 HOA board members were standing on my dock, installing a bright yellow sign. Notice, unauthorized watercraft prohibited. HOA Regulation 15.7. Miranda was there in her usual outfit, white blazer, designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, holding a clipboard like it was some kind of legal weapon. The morning air was still cool, carrying the scent of pine needles and fresh water, but her presence somehow made everything feel contaminated. "Morning, Wes," she called out with that fake friendly tone. "Just updating our watercraft regulations." "Get off my dock," I said, cutting the engine and drifting closer. "And take your sign with you." "Actually, this dock is in violation of community setback requirements," she replied, not moving an inch. "And that boat of yours is, well, it's not exactly in keeping with our aesthetic standards. My boat's a 1987 Lund fishing boat. Aluminum hull dinged from 30-plus years of honest work. Motor that sounds like a lawnmower having an asthma attack. But she's reliable. More importantly, she was Sarah's favorite. We'd spend Sunday mornings out there, just floating and talking while Trevor slept in. "You can't ban my boat from the lake," I said. Miranda's smile got wider. "Actually, we can. The HOA has exclusive community water rights. Check your deed." That phrase, "check your deed," hit me like a slap. Because you know what? I'd never actually looked at the original property documents. When Grandpa died, everything just transferred over through the family trust. The lawyer handled the paperwork. I signed where he pointed, and that was that. But Miranda's confidence bothered me. She was too sure, too smug. And in my experience, when someone acts that's certain about something, they're usually hiding something. That afternoon, I drove into town to the county clerk's office. The building smelled like old paper and floor wax, fluorescent lights humming overhead while I filled out the property record request forms. Cost me $12 to get copies of everything. The original 1954 deed, all subsequent transfers, HOA formation documents, the works. I spread everything out on my kitchen table that night after Trevor went to bed. Coffee growing cold, reading glasses perched on my nose, trying to make sense of 70 years of legal language, property descriptions, meets and bounds, easement grants. It was like trying to read a foreign language. But then I found something interesting. The original deed from 1954 was crystal clear. My grandfather, Samuel Guthrie, had purchased Lot 1 containing approximately 15 acres, including the entirety of Cedar Lake, a natural body of water of approximately 15 acres. The lake itself, not just lake access, but the actual water and lake bed, belonged to him. More importantly, when he started selling off the surrounding lots in the 1960s, the deeds clearly stated that purchasers were buying lake access privileges, not ownership rights. The HOA documents from 1987, when the community was officially formed, referenced these existing access agreements, but never claimed actual ownership of the water body itself. I read that section 3 times before it really sank in. Miranda and her HOA board had been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. They thought they owned the lake because everyone acted like they did. But legal ownership and common practice are two very different things. The next morning, I called Miranda directly. "About that boat ban," I said when she answered. "I checked my deed like you suggested." "Good," she replied. I could hear traffic in the background, probably driving to another overpriced property showing. "I trust you'll be removing that eyesore by the weekend." "Actually, I won't. See, turns out my grandfather never sold the lake. He sold lots with access privileges. Big difference." Dead silence on the other end. "Then that's impossible." $12 filing fee at the county clerk's office, I said. "You might want to check your own paperwork before you go posting any more signs on my property." The line went quiet except for the hum of her car's engine. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its fake friendliness. "We'll see about that, Mr. Guthrie." She hung up, but I was smiling for the first time in weeks. because I just learned something that would change everything. When you're dealing with bullies, the best defense isn't backing down. It's doing your homework. Miranda didn't waste time. 3 days later, I found a petition taped to my front door. Professional printing on expensive paper, the kind that feels substantial between your fingers. Petition for property improvement enforcement in bold letters across the top. 63 signatures. Nearly every household in the community had signed, demanding I upgrade or vacate my property within 30 days for the health and safety of our neighborhood. The petition cited everything from structural concerns to environmental hazards to significant property value impact. Reading through the list of signatures, I recognized most of the names, folks who'd waved hello for years, whose kids Trevor had gone to school with, who'd borrowed my tools when their fancy equipment broke down. Now they were demanding I be kicked out. The smell of bacon drifted over from the Mitchell's house next door. Bob Mitchell had signed the petition too, the same Bob who'd asked me to fix his boat trailer hitch just last month. His wife Linda, who used to bring Sarah homemade cookies when she was going through chemo, had signed right below his name. 63 people want us gone? I told Trevor that night over dinner. We were eating takeout pizza on the porch, listening to the evening sounds of the lake, water lapping against the dock posts, the distant hum of someone's pool filter. Maybe we should just move, Dad, Trevor said quietly. He'd been 17 for 3 months, but right then he looked about 12. I mean, if everyone wants us to leave. No, the word came out harder than I intended. This is our home. Your mom planted that maple tree when you were born. Her ashes are scattered in these waters. We're not running. Trevor nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Kids his age shouldn't have to worry about losing their homes. Shouldn't have to choose between fitting in and family loyalty. That weekend, I decided to install some security cameras around the property. Nothing fancy, just basic trail cameras from the sporting goods store, the kind hunters use to monitor deer movements. I learned a long time ago that when people start playing games, it's smart to document everything. The cameras were small, battery-powered units that triggered on motion. I mounted them discreetly around the cabin perimeter, focusing on the dock area, the driveway, and the main yard. The installation was simple, just screw mounts and adjustable brackets, but the psychological effect was immediate. Suddenly, I felt like I had some control back. Good thing I did, because Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was underneath my truck changing the oil when I heard footsteps crunching across the gravel driveway. Expensive shoes, not work boots. I rolled out from under the chassis to find a man in a county inspector's uniform standing there with a clipboard. Wesley Guthrie, he asked. I'm Jim Pole's son, county building inspector. Got a complaint about potential code violations on this property. Jim was maybe 55, soft around the middle with the kind of mustache that went out of style in 1987. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, and there was a coffee stain near the breast pocket. Everything about him screamed, going through the motions. What kind of violations? I asked, wiping oil off my hand with an old shop rag. Structural integrity concerns, septic system issues, potential water contamination risks. He read from his clipboard like he was ordering from a menu. Anonymous complaint filed Friday afternoon. I knew exactly who'd filed that complaint. Miranda had escalated from petition drives to official harassment, using the county's power to do her dirty work. Mind if I look around? Jim asked, but he was already walking toward the cabin like permission was optional. For the next hour, I watched him poke around my property. He checked the foundation, measured setbacks, photographed the septic system vent pipes, took water samples from my well. His camera clicked constantly, documenting everything from the screen porch to Trevor's tire swing. But here's the thing about having worked in construction for 20-plus years. I know building codes. My cabin was built in 1954, which means it's grandfathered under current regulations. The septic system was updated in 2019 after Sarah's medical bills forced me to refinance. Everything was legal, documented, and up to current standards. When Jim finished his inspection, he seemed almost disappointed. Well, he said, consulting his checklist. Foundation solid. Septic appears compliant. Electrical looks professionally installed. Find any violations? I asked. Not really, no. He paused at his county vehicle, a dented white pickup with official logos. Though, I did notice some interesting things about some other properties around here. Several houses with unpermitted dock extensions, a few septic systems that might not meet current setback requirements. But those weren't part of my assignment today. He drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway with a growing realization. Miranda's inspection gambit had backfired because apparently when you invite official scrutiny to a neighborhood, everyone gets scrutinized. The lien showed up on a Tuesday morning in November, delivered by certified mail. 3 envelopes, each requiring my signature, each containing legal documents that made my stomach drop. The paper was thick, official, with raised seals that left impressions when you ran your finger across them. Notice of lien placement. $47,000 in unpaid community assessments and lake maintenance fees. $7,000 for 25 years of lake maintenance assessments I'd supposedly never paid, plus penalties and interest compounded annually at 8%. The second lien was for $23,000 in emergency community improvements, repairs to the boat launch, dock maintenance, water quality testing. All expenses I'd never been billed for, never agreed to, never even heard about. The third was the real kick in the teeth. $15,000 for legal fees and administrative costs related to my ongoing violation disputes. Sitting at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold while I read through the paperwork, I could smell the wood smoke from someone's fireplace mixing with the crisp November air. The liens were professionally prepared, filed with the county, and legally binding against my property. If I couldn't pay, they could force a sale. Miranda wasn't just trying to pressure me anymore. She was trying to financially destroy me. I called my bank that afternoon. "Mr. Guthrie," said Janet Morrison, the loan officer who'd handled Sarah's life insurance refinancing. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. With these liens against the property, we can't approve any additional lending. In fact, depending on their validity, they could trigger the acceleration clause in your current mortgage." Translation: the bank might demand immediate payment of my entire remaining mortgage balance. Money I didn't have, couldn't get, and couldn't earn fast enough to avoid foreclosure. That night, I sat Trevor down for the conversation no parent wants to have. We might lose the cabin, I told him straight out. No point sugarcoating it when the kid was 17 and smart enough to see the writing on the wall. Trevor was quiet for a long time, staring out at the lake through her kitchen window. The water was dark and still, reflecting the last light of sunset like polished metal. "Because of the money?" he asked finally. "Because someone's using the system against us," I said. "But I'm not giving up yet." The next morning, I drove to town and did something I should have done weeks earlier. I hired a lawyer. Not some fancy downtown firm, but Tom Bradley, a guy who'd gone to high school with Sarah and specialized in property law. His office was above the hardware store, reached by a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. Tom was maybe 50, with graying hair and the kind of comfortable, rumpled appearance that comes from being more interested in work than appearance. His office smelled like coffee and old law books, fluorescent light buzzing overhead while he reviewed my documents. "These liens are interesting," he said after an hour of reading. "Very detailed, very official looking. There's just one problem." "What's that?" "Half the fees they're claiming are for services related to lake ownership, dock maintenance, water quality testing, boat launch repairs." Tom looked up over his reading glasses. "But according to your deed, you own the lake. You can't be assessed fees for maintaining your own property." I'd been so focused on defending against their attacks, I hadn't stopped to consider whether their claims were even legal in the first place. "There's more," Tom continued. "This administrative fee for violation disputes. That's basically charging you for the cost of harassing you. Most states don't allow that unless it's specifically written into the HOA covenants." He pulled out a thick folder of documents. "I need to see the original HOA formation papers, all the deed restrictions, every amendment they've passed in the last 5 years. This feels like someone's either badly misinformed about their legal authority or deliberately overreaching." That same afternoon, Tom filed a formal challenge to all 3 liens, demanding proof of legal authority for the assessments. More importantly, he sent a letter to Miranda and the HOA board requiring them to produce documentation showing they had the right to charge fees related to lake ownership. The response came faster than I expected. Miranda called me directly that evening, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't sound confident. "Mr. Guthrie, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the fee structure." "Miscommunication. Perhaps we can work out a payment plan, reduce the total amount, spread it over several years." I could hear the uncertainty in her voice now. The legal challenge had rattled her, made her realize she might have overplayed her hand. "Tell you what, Miranda," I said. "How about you provide proof that you have the legal right to charge me fees for maintaining my own lake? Until then, those liens are staying challenged." The line went quiet, except for the sound of her breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be, Wes." But I was done being intimidated, because sometimes when bullies push too hard, they expose their own weaknesses. Tom Bradley called me on a Friday afternoon in December, excitement clear in his voice despite his usually calm demeanor. "Wes, you need to get down here right now and bring Trevor. He's going to want to see this." The drive into town took 15 minutes through light snow, the kind that dusts everything white without making the roads dangerous. Trevor rode shotgun, both of us wondering what Tom had discovered that couldn't wait until Monday. His office was warm compared to the December chill outside, space heater humming in the corner while Tom spread documents across his conference table. The papers looked old. Some were photocopies of handwritten records. Others were typed on vintage letterheads with formatting that screamed 1950s. "Remember how I said I needed to see all the original HOA documents?" Tom asked, barely containing his grin. "Well, I found them. All of them. Going back to the very beginning." He pulled out a manila folder thick with decades of paperwork. "Your grandfather was smart, Wes. Really smart. When he started selling those lots in the 1960s, he kept detailed records of everything. Every deed, every restriction, every agreement." The first document Tom showed us was Samuel Guthrie's original deed from 1954, 15 acres, including the entirety of Cedar Lake. Clear, unambiguous, legally bulletproof. "But here's where it gets interesting," Tom continued. "When your grandfather sold the first lots, he specifically retained ownership of the lake itself. The buyers got perpetual access privileges for fishing, swimming, and small watercraft. Nothing more." Trevor leaned over my shoulder, reading along as Tom walked us through document after document. Each property sale from the 1960s and 70s had identical language. Lake access privileges, not ownership rights. "So the HOA doesn't own the lake," I said. "I already figured that out, right? But that's not the big revelation." Tom's smile got wider. "The big revelation is what they've been doing with the money." He spread out a new set of papers, financial records, bank statements, tax filings. "Remember those liens for $47,000 in lake maintenance fees you supposedly never paid?" "Yeah. Well, according to HOA financial records, they've been collecting lake maintenance fees from every homeowner for the past 25 years. 80 houses, $300 per month each. That's $24,000 per month. Nearly $300,000 per year. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. That's $7. $5 million, Tom finished. Give or take. Collected over 25 years for maintaining a lake they don't own." Trevor whistled low. "Holy language," I said automatically, but my heart wasn't in it. Tom pulled out more documents, checks, deposit slips, budget reports. "It gets better. They've been using that money to fund all kinds of community improvements. The new community center, playground equipment, road maintenance. None of which benefits you directly, all of which was paid for with fees collected for maintaining your property." I stared at the paperwork, trying to process what he was telling me. They've been stealing from me for 25 years. Legally speaking, yes. They've been collecting fees for services related to property they don't own, then using that money for general community purposes. It's conversion at minimum, possibly fraud. The space heater clicked off, leaving the room quiet except for the sound of paper rustling as Tom organized the documents. Outside, snow continued to fall past the window, but I barely noticed. "There's one more thing," Tom said. "Miranda Ashworth has been on the HOA board for 8 years. She signed off on budgets that specifically included these lake maintenance fees. She knew they were collecting money for maintaining your property. That explained her confidence, her aggressive tactics, her willingness to escalate. She wasn't just trying to push out an unwanted neighbor. She was protecting a revenue stream that had been funding the entire community for decades. "What happens now?" Trevor asked. Tom leaned back in his chair, that lawyer smile spreading across his face. "Now we have a conversation with the HOA board about paying back fees they never had the right to collect. And if they're not interested in conversation," he gestured at the stacks of evidence, "we'll let a judge explain property law to them." For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like we had the upper hand. Because sometimes when you dig deep enough, you don't just find buried treasure. You find out your enemies have been digging their own graves. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee and started making lists. Not just any lists, but detailed, methodical plans that would make my old Army sergeant proud. Because if 25 years of construction work had taught me anything, it was that proper planning prevents poor performance. First list, legal strategy. Tom would handle the formal restitution demand, $7. $5 million in wrongfully collected fees, plus interest and penalties. But lawsuits take time, and Miranda wasn't going to sit quietly while we dismantled her financial empire. We needed leverage that would force immediate action. Second list, physical preparations. The community parking lot sat entirely on my property, a fact I confirmed with the original survey stakes still visible along the tree line. 80 households, most with 2 cars each, all dependent on parking that existed only because my grandfather had been generous with his land use. Time to be less generous. I called my buddy Rick Martinez, who owned a hydraulics company in town. Rick and I had served together in Afghanistan, where he'd learned to build and repair everything from landing ramps to vehicle lifts. If anyone could help me engineer a solution to the parking problem, it was Rick. "You want to do what?" he asked when I explained my idea over beers at Murphy's Tavern. The smell of fried food and the sound of pool balls clicking made for good cover conversation. "Remote control parking traps," I repeated. "Cars drive over them, look like normal pavement, but when activated, hydraulic pistons drop the platforms 4 feet down, creating perfect car-size holes." Rick was quiet for a moment, processing the engineering challenges. "It's doable," he said finally. "Expensive, but doable. We need steel platforms, hydraulic cylinders, a compressed air system, remote controls." He grabbed a napkin and started sketching. "How many parking spaces we talking about?" 42 marked spaces, plus maybe 15 overflow spots. "Jesus, Wes, that's a lot of hardware. I've got Sarah's life insurance money sitting in CDs. Figure it's time to put it to good use." The technical details took shape over the next hour. Each parking space would get a steel platform mounted on hydraulic cylinders, disguised with asphalt coating to look like regular pavement. The whole system would connect to a central compressed air tank, hidden in my workshop with remote controls that could activate individual spots or the entire lot. "Timeline?" Rick asked. "HOA is having their annual lakefront luxury tour in 3 weeks." I said, "Real estate agents bringing potential buyers, current residents showing off their properties. Perfect timing for a demonstration." Rick grinned. "I like the way you think." The next week was a blur of midnight construction. Rick brought his crew after hours, working by floodlight to install the hydraulic systems. The sound of drilling and welding echoed across the lake, but most residents probably assumed it was routine maintenance. The engineering was more complex than I'd expected. Each platform required precise calibration to support vehicle weight while remaining invisible from above. The hydraulic lines had to be buried deep enough to avoid freezing, with emergency shut-off valves in case something went wrong. But Rick's crew knew their business. By Thursday night, we had 57 individual parking traps connected to a central control system in my workshop. Each trap could be activated independently or as part of groups, front row, back section, or the entire lot simultaneously. While Rick handled the physical installation, I worked on the legal front with Tom. The restitution demand went out certified mail to every HOA board member, with copies to their attorney and insurance company. 20 pages of documentation proving 25 years of illegal fee collection, with a demand for immediate cessation and full restitution. The response came faster than expected. A conference call scheduled for the following Monday with the entire HOA board, their lawyer, and a representative from their insurance company. They're scared, Tom told me after the call was arranged. Insurance companies don't get involved unless there's real legal exposure. But I wasn't interested in conference calls anymore. Miranda had escalated this fight with liens and foreclosure threats. Time to show her what real escalation looked like. The final piece of my plan involved Trevor, though he didn't know it yet. His girlfriend, Emma, worked for the local TV station as a production assistant. Nothing fancy, mostly coffee runs and equipment setup, but she had access to the news department. Think Emma could convince her boss to cover a human interest story. I asked Trevor over dinner the night before the luxury tour. David versus Goliath. Working man fights back against HOA overreach. Trevor's eyes lit up. She's been looking for a way to pitch her first real story. This could be perfect. Everything was falling into place. Legal pressure from one direction, media attention from another, and 57 hidden parking traps ready to demonstrate exactly who controlled access to this community. Sometimes the best offense isn't just a good defense. It's a carefully engineered surprise that changes the entire game. Miranda must have sensed something was coming because she escalated faster than I expected. 2 days before the lakefront luxury tour, she played a card I hadn't seen coming: private security. I was coming home from the hardware store when I spotted the black SUV parked at the entrance to the community, tinted windows, professional-looking guy in a suit behind the wheel, clipboard on the dashboard. When I slowed down to get a better look, he pulled out behind me, following at a distance until I reached my driveway. The second security vehicle was parked across the street from my cabin, positioned with a clear view of my front door and the path to my dock. Same setup, black SUV, suited driver, obvious surveillance. What the hell is this about? I called Miranda directly from my front porch, watching the security guy watch me through his windshield. Enhanced Community Safety Patrol, she replied smoothly. Several residents have expressed concerns about unusual activity in the area. Unusual activity. Construction noise at odd hours, unfamiliar vehicles, potential code violations. The security company is just helping us document any irregularities. I understood the game she was playing. The security guards weren't there to protect anyone. They were there to intimidate me, document my activities, and hopefully catch me doing something that could be used against me later. But two could play a documentation. Over the next 24 hours, I quietly activated my trail cameras and started my own surveillance operation. Every time one of the security guards left his vehicle, I had photos. When they met to compare notes, I had video. When one of them walked onto my property to check for safety violations, I had evidence of trespassing. The guards weren't particularly professional. The one watching my front door spent most of his time on his phone, occasionally getting out to stretch or walk around his vehicle. The one at the community entrance seemed more interested in the fishing action on the lake than actual security work. But on Wednesday morning, things got more serious. I was in my workshop doing final tests on the hydraulic system controls when I heard footsteps on my gravel driveway. Not the casual walking of someone passing by, but deliberate footsteps heading directly toward my front door. Through the workshop window, I watched one of the security guards approach my cabin with what looked like a small camera or recording device. He spent several minutes photographing my electrical meter, water connections, and septic system vent pipes. Then he walked around to the back deck and started taking pictures through my kitchen window. That crossed the line. I stepped out of the workshop just as the guard was cupping his hands against the glass to see inside my house better. "Can I help you?" I called out, loud enough to get his attention, but not quite shouting. The guard spun around, startled. He was maybe 35, built like an ex-cop with the kind of mustache that suggested he took himself very seriously. Just conducting a routine security assessment, he said, "Try to sound official. Making sure everything's safe and secure." By looking through my windows, visual inspection for potential safety hazards. He gestured vaguely at my cabin, like it might explode at any moment. Just being thorough. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "And you are a security officer conducting official business on my private property without permission, photographing the inside of my home." I kept the camera rolling as he realized his position had become uncomfortable. "I think we're done here." The guard backed away from my cabin, but his attitude shifted from apologetic to defensive. Ma'am hired us to monitor suspicious activities, construction work at odd hours, potential code violations, safety concerns. Ma'am, he caught himself too late, the community representative who contracted our services. Miranda, of course. That afternoon, I ran the guard's license plates through a buddy of mine who worked dispatch for the county sheriff. Both vehicles belonged to Apex Security Solutions, a company that specialized in corporate investigation and asset protection services. Translation, private investigators who did corporate spying and intimidation work. But when I dug deeper into Apex Security, I found something interesting. 2 of their current employees had outstanding warrants for unpaid child support. Another had a suspended driver's license for DUI, and the owner of the company had been sued twice in the past 3 years for harassment and illegal surveillance. I forwarded all of this information to Tom Bradley, along with videos of the guards trespassing on my property and photographing my home. By Thursday evening, Tom had sent a cease and desist letter to both Apex Security and Miranda personally, threatening criminal charges for harassment and invasion of privacy. The security vehicles disappeared that same night, but I knew Miranda was just regrouping. The Lakefront Luxury Tour was scheduled for Saturday, with real estate agents and potential buyers touring the community's most expensive properties. Perfect timing for a demonstration of exactly who controlled access to this neighborhood. Friday night, 12 hours before the luxury tour, Miranda played her final card. She tried to destroy me the way powerful people have always destroyed working folks, by attacking my livelihood. I was in my workshop doing final checks on the hydraulic control system when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of my biggest client, Johnson Marine Services. "Wes," said Dave Johnson, owner of the largest boat dealership in the county. "I need to talk to you about our service contract." Dave and I had worked together for 8 years. His dealership sold high-end boats to lake communities throughout the region, and I handled most of his warranty repair work. Reliable income, good relationship, no problems. "What's up, Dave?" "I got a call today from someone at Cedar Lake Community. Woman named Miranda something. Said she was with the Homeowners Association." My stomach dropped. She told me there were some concerns about the quality of marine service work being done in their community. Mentioned potential liability issues, insurance problems, that kind of thing. I could hear the discomfort in Dave's voice. He was a straight shooter, never played games, but he was also a businessman who couldn't afford legal complications. "Dave, whatever she told you, look, Wes, I don't know what's going on between you and these people, but I can't have my dealership caught in the middle of some neighborhood dispute. I'm going to have to suspend our service contract pending resolution of these issues." The workshop fell quiet except for the hum of the air compressor and the distant sound of water against my dock. 8 years of steady work, gone with one phone call from Miranda. "This is about my HOA dispute," I said. "She's trying to pressure me by destroying my income." "Maybe so, but I can't afford to find out." "Sorry, Wes." After Dave hung up, I sat in my workshop, staring at the hydraulic controls, rage building in my chest like steam in a pressure cooker. Miranda had escalated beyond property disputes, beyond legal harassment, beyond intimidation. She was trying to destroy my ability to support my family. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd given me nothing left to lose. I called Tom Bradley immediately. "She just committed tortious interference with business relations," Tom said when I explained the Johnson Marine situation. "That's a serious civil tort, potentially criminal depending on how it was done." "Is that going to help me pay my bills next month?" "No, but it's going to help us in court." "And Wes, document everything from this point forward. Every phone call, every conversation, every action they take, because this pattern of escalating harassment is going to be crucial evidence." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on my deck at 2 a.m., looking out over the lake that had belonged to my family for 70 years, thinking about Sarah and everything we'd planned to build here. The water was dark and still, reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December weather that makes lake property look like a magazine cover. Perfect day for a luxury tour. Perfect day for potential buyers to imagine themselves living in paradise. By 9 a.m., cars started arriving for the lakefront luxury tour, expensive vehicles, BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas, filling up the community parking lot that sat entirely on my property. Real estate agents in business suits, potential buyers dressed like they were headed to a country club, current residents playing the role of gracious hosts. Miranda was in her element, greeting visitors in a white blazer and heels that clicked against the asphalt as she walked between cars. Her smile was bright and welcoming, playing the part of the perfect community representative, showing off her little slice of paradise. I watched from my workshop window as more than 50 vehicles found parking spots throughout the lot. Cars worth more than my annual income, owned by people who thought they were buying into an exclusive community where working folks like me didn't exist. Emma Williams, Trevor's girlfriend, arrived in the local TV station's news van just before 10 a.m. She'd convinced her boss to cover the story as a David versus Goliath human interest piece, though she didn't know the full scope of what was about to happen. At exactly 10:30 a.m., with the luxury tour in full swing and the parking lot packed with expensive cars, I activated the hydraulic control system, all 57 parking traps simultaneously. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard, a mechanical symphony of hydraulic pistons extending, steel platforms dropping, and expensive cars suddenly finding themselves trapped in perfectly car-shaped holes 4 feet deep. The hydraulic system worked flawlessly, each vehicle settling gently but completely into its custom-designed trap. The chaos was immediate and beautiful. 57 cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas, Audis, and one particularly expensive-looking Porsche, simultaneously dropped 4 feet into perfectly engineered holes. The sounds were perfect. First, the mechanical whir of hydraulic pistons extending all at once. Then the surprised shouts and screams from car owners who suddenly found themselves looking up from 4 feet below ground level. Car alarms started going off in a cacophony of electronic wails and honking horns. Miranda's scream cut through everything else. What the hell is happening? She ran from car to car in her white heels, clipboard forgotten, perfectly styled hair coming undone as she tried to understand how 57 vehicles had just disappeared into the earth. Her white blazer was getting dirty as she knelt at the edge of holes, shouting down at trapped drivers. "Everyone stay calm," she yelled, though she was clearly anything but calm herself. "This is some kind of sinkhole event." I walked out of my workshop carrying a bullhorn and the original 1954 property deed, with Emma Williams and her camera crew following close behind. The TV camera was rolling, capturing everything. The trapped cars, the panicking real estate agents, the confused potential buyers standing around holes in the ground. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced through the bullhorn, "welcome to my parking lot." The crowd turned toward me. 50-plus people in business attire standing around car-shaped holes like confused tourists at a very expensive disaster site. For those who don't know me, I'm Wesley Guthrie, owner of this property and everything you're standing on, including the parking lot that just developed some structural issues. Miranda pushed through the crowd toward me, her face twisted with rage. "You did this. You sabotaged the parking lot." "Actually, Miranda, I improved it. Added some new features, hydraulic platforms, remote operation capability. Very high-tech." Emma's camera captured everything as I held up the property deed. "See, here's the thing that Miranda forgot to mention in her sales presentations. This parking lot, this road, and that beautiful lake behind me, they all belong to me. I've since 1954. County Sheriff Bob Wilson pulled up in his patrol car, red and blue lights flashing. Bob was an old fishing buddy, someone who'd known my family for decades. He climbed out of his cruiser, looking at the trapped cars with barely concealed amazement. "Wes," he called out, "you want to explain what happened here?" "Mechanical demonstration," I replied, showing potential buyers exactly who controls access to this community. Miranda spun toward Sheriff Wilson. "Arrest him. He trapped our cars. This is sabotage, vandalism, destruction of property." "Actually," I said, pulling out a thick folder of documents, "this is property rights enforcement." Tom Bradley arrived just then, apparently having gotten Emma's call about the breaking news situation at Cedar Lake. He carried his own folder of legal documents and a very satisfied smile. "Sheriff Wilson," Tom called out, Before anyone gets arrested, you might want to see these financial records. What happened next was the most beautiful moment of the entire ordeal. Tom spread out 25 years of HOA financial documents on the hood of Sheriff Wilson's patrol car, while Emma's camera rolled and 50-plus people watched from around the edges of car-shaped holes. Miranda Ashworth and the Cedar Lake HOA have been collecting lake maintenance fees for 25 years, Tom announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Approximately $7. $5 million in fees for maintaining a lake they don't own. The crowd went quiet except for the distant sound of car alarms still wailing from the holes. Furthermore, Tom continued, they've used that money to fund community improvements that exclusively benefit everyone except the actual lake owner. I looked directly at Miranda, then spoke into the bullhorn so everyone could hear. You've been stealing from me for 25 years, using my property for free parking while charging me fees for maintaining my own lake, playing games with liens and foreclosures and private investigators. Miranda's face had gone from red to white. Those fees were legitimate. Prove it, I said simply. Show me one legal document that gives your HOA ownership of my lake or the right to charge me fees for my own property. Sheriff Wilson looked around at the trapped cars, the crowd of stranded luxury tour guests, and the stack of legal documents. Then he started laughing. You know what, folks, he said. I think this is a civil matter. Property owner demonstrating his property rights on his own land. Miranda's perfect community showcase had become a public expose of 25 years of fraud, broadcast live on local television, with 57 expensive cars providing visual proof that I controlled access to their exclusive paradise. The aftermath moved faster than anyone expected, mostly because having 57 trapped cars creates a certain urgency around problem solving. Within 2 hours, I had 3 different tow truck companies on site, charging $500 per vehicle to extract cars from the hydraulic holes. The tow truck operators were having the time of their lives. They'd never seen such a perfectly organized extraction job. Every car came out without a scratch, though several owners needed help climbing out of the holes. Miranda tried to refuse payment, claiming the trapping was illegal and she wouldn't pay extraction fees. I handed her a simple invoice. Parking violation fine, $500 per vehicle. Payment due immediately or vehicles remain impounded on private property. She paid. By Monday morning, Tom Bradley had fielded calls from the HOA's insurance company, their attorney, and representatives from 3 different law firms specializing in financial fraud. Everyone wanted to settle quickly and quietly. The final agreement took 6 weeks to negotiate, but the terms were everything I'd hoped for. The HOA paid $2. $1 million in restitution for 25 years of illegally collected lake fees, plus legal costs and damages. Miranda resigned from the board and moved to Florida within 2 months, apparently deciding that winter in a state without hydraulic parking traps was preferable to facing her neighbors. More importantly, the settlement established formal legal agreements for the first time in the community's history. Every homeowner now pays me $200 per month for lake access privileges and $50 per month for parking rights. The money is automatically deducted from their HOA dues and deposited directly into my account. I used part of the settlement money to renovate the cabin. New roof, updated electrical, fresh paint that makes the old place look like something Sarah would have been proud of. The rest went into Trevor's college fund and a conservation trust to protect the lake for future generations. Trevor started his senior year at State University last fall, studying environmental engineering with a focus on water resource management. Seems fitting, considering he's likely to inherit a lake someday. He brings friends home for fishing weekends, and the cabin's full of laughter again for the first time since Sarah died. The community itself changed in ways I never expected. Without Miranda's aggressive leadership, the HOA board became more collaborative and reasonable. They established a scholarship fund for local kids interested in trades or technical careers, funded partly by the monthly fees they pay me for lake access. Every summer, we host a community fishing derby for kids from town, with prizes funded by the Conservation Trust. Watching children discover the joy of catching their first fish in the same waters where my grandfather taught me to cast a line, that's worth more than all the settlement money combined. The hydraulic parking system is still there, though I've only activated it twice since the luxury tour incident. Once when someone parked in my personal spot despite clear private Wes's truck only signage, and once when a delivery truck blocked the entire lot for 3 hours. Both times, the problem was resolved quickly and without argument. Emma Williams got her first big break covering our story, which went viral on social media and led to a promotion at the TV station. She and Trevor are still together, planning to get married after his graduation. She jokes that she owes her journalism career to hydraulic parking traps. Sheriff Bob Wilson stops by every few weeks for coffee and fishing, usually with stories about other property disputes around the county. Apparently, our case became something of a legend in property law circles, an example of how detailed research and creative engineering can resolve conflicts that seemed impossible. The lake itself has never been more beautiful. Water testing shows excellent quality, fish populations are healthy, and the Conservation Trust ensures it'll stay that way for generations. Sometimes I sit on the dock at sunset, listening to the water lap against the posts, and imagine Sarah's approval of how things turned out. If you got an HOA nightmare story of your own, drop in the comments below. I love hearing how other folks dealt with petty authority and bureaucratic overreach. And if this story helped you think differently about property rights or standing up to bullies, hit that subscribe button. There are plenty more stories where this came from. Because sometimes when someone tries to push you off your own land, the best response isn't backing down. It's reminding them exactly who owns the ground they're standing on. Bell.